This is what happens during an aircraft A check and C check. Now, an A check is a very thorough inspection, but it's only visual. So you can imagine the different things that these mechanics are doing. They're checking all the lights, they're checking all the tires, they're checking the control surfaces. They're also checking the fuselage for any sort of damage. Now, the technician here is using a fluorescent light to check for any cracks on the wings or the control surfaces. If there was any cracks, it would be very obvious because it would glow. Now, during the A check, they also change the oil. That's why you see them going up to this panel right here and opening it up and pulling out this big canister. The oil changes on most aircraft are very frequent. It depends on the type of aircraft, but usually every 50 hours or so they need to change the oil. You'll also notice that there's 2 technicians underneath the aircraft. One of them is working on the left main landing gear, and the other one is working on the right main landing gear. They're basically doing the same thing. They're just on opposite sides. They're checking all the bolts for any sort of looseness or wear, and they're also checking the brakes. Now, moving back inside the aircraft, we have another mechanic here. He's checking all of the window and the windshield seals to make sure that there's no cracks or no damage, because if there was any damage, it could be very dangerous during flight. He's also checking the static ports to make sure that they're not clogged. Those little holes right there are actually static ports. They're used for the pitot tubes that are sending information to the flight instruments. Moving along, we have a technician here who's checking all of the control cables to make sure that there's no corrosion and that they're in good working order, because if any one of these cables were to break, it could be enough to cause catastrophic damage to the aircraft. So they're checking them before every single flight. Next, we move on to the C check. Now, the C check is a much more in-depth inspection. It's basically taking everything apart and checking it. So you'll notice here they're taking off the landing gear. They're basically doing the same thing that they did on the A check, but now they're taking it apart and they're also using some pretty cool tools. They're using a borescope, which is basically a camera that allows them to see inside of the aircraft and make sure that everything is working properly. They're also checking all the nuts and bolts. They're making sure that the torque is correct. That's very important. If the bolts aren't torqued correctly, they could come loose in flight and again, cause catastrophic damage. Now, I know this video was really fast-paced and a lot of things were happening, but I tried to capture as much as I could so that you guys could see the entire scope of work that goes into an A check and a C check. There's a lot more that goes into it, but like I said, it's very time-consuming and it takes a lot longer than just a few minutes. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and you learned something new. And if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe.